In the lecture History of Numbers, we have seen that Babylonians, then the Egyptians, they were, or the Greeks or Romans, they were the earlier civilization which basically worked with natural numbers. And if you see historically, the primitive man had very limited computing requirement. For example, they needed to keep track of the sheep, the flock of sheep. So if the sheep has gone for grazing and if they come back, they wanted to ensure that all sheep have returned back home. Was one primitive requirement, and for example for us, similarly for other animals as well. So counting was for such small things, or for example keeping track of agricultural produce that you see now on your screen. Now if these were the simple requirements of earlier primitive man or humans, then how did they do it? Remember, these, as again I repeat, that these the numbers that you now use for counting, these were not available to them. For example, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11, these were not available. This system was not available. So how did they count? And this is how we believe that children should be taught. Not this way. This is a complex way, and the way they should be taught is the way earliest men or humans used to count. The one way of counting was they used to use tree bark, shown on your screen now, and with a knife they used to make lines like this with every for every item. They used to make line like this. For example, you have a sheep, another sheep, another one, and that's how they used to mark. This was one way of doing it for earliest humans. The other way was actually using pebbles. For example, if this was the sheep that is coming in, then one pebble from here used to be taken out. Remember, at that time the one that I used in my expression right now was not invented. So they used to just pick up, without saying one, they used to just pick up a pebble and keep for this sheep, and similarly for this one, yet another pebble. For this one, let's say another pebble, and that's how the pebble, without saying 1, 2, 3, they used to keep track of all the sheep, and similarly for agriculture produce. So this is how children in the kindergarten have to be taught basic counting initially, which I'll explain more in detail later. Without saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, they should be actually shown with things like pebbles, and then they should use this in basic arithmetical operation, which I'll illustrate later on. So we know for sheep or agriculture produced, we can mark these things while counting in primitive way. Is, let's say on a tree we mark like this for another sheep, yet another sheep, another sheep. These are marking we are making on the tree bark. So this is one way. Other ways, we use pebbles for every sheep, or pebbles for every, let's say, tomato or whichever vegetable you have. So you say this is for this tomato, this one is for this tomato, this one is for this tomato. So this is another way of representing. But yet another way which we can use for kindergarten students and for their understanding, because that will make arithmetic very simple for them, is with, instead of using these lines or pebbles, we actually use basically the boxes like this. This box for this one, the another box for another one, another box for another one, and another box for another one. And we have blockers in the market. Such blocks are available as toys, and then these can be used in the classroom for small children, and they can play with them for basic arithmetic operations, as I will illustrate this this later on. So if a children is to if a child, let's say, has to count let's say the number of sheep in this let's say in this rectangle coming, which are totally inside, let's say in this rectangle, and I just for illustration purposes, so for this the child will write this, for this sheep this, for this sheep this one, and for this one, and for this one. And the child then has to say that this is my number for the sheep that I have counted here. Note that if we had started this with this 1 2 3 4 5, then the problem with children is that they start getting, as start associating, let's say, this number, this symbol with the number. Remember, this symbol 5 in Hindu system is the symbol for this many pieces of items, which is the fundamental idea. But problem is that when you start with these numbers initially, children start getting confused and they start thinking that this is a number, though in fact this is a representation of a number, let's say physical items, as I showed. So this is how they should be taught initially. The way you can have similar objects on the blackboard, and you can say that now you have blocks in your hand, and pick up the corresponding number of blocks and put it on the right side of your table, and they should then one by one pick block, keep marking the elements, and that's how the counting process should come into the minds of the young people. So for instance, if you say how many cauliflowers are there, this vegetable, then a child has to count using these blocks. Then child will say, this block I have kept it for this, for this I'll keep another one, and for this you will say I'll keep another one, and for this another one. So the child is counted, and for simplicity ask child to join this, and so that he gets the feel of, so this is the feel for the number of cauliflowers which are there. So this becomes representation of the number of cauliflowers which are there. And similarly, now if I were to count tomatoes, and I'll do it directly now, for this I'll draw the first one, and for this one another one. So I have shown this for this one, for this one, for this one, and this you have this one. And that's how children should understand that this is the number for the cauliflowers, and this is the number for tomatoes. And if I were to ask, and I have to tell children to actually add these and tell me how many total number of tomatoes and cauliflowers are there, then the addition should be taught as actually putting all these blocks together in a single row. And this then for the child should be the new number, and that's how one should educate small children, that this, the idea of plus this, which is equal to this, has to be explained. One has to say that this is a number, this is another number, without saying 1 2 3 4, and this is the result of operation called addition, which gives a total number of items if for example that total number of items will be the tomato and the cauliflower as shown. So this is how various other exercises have to be created for children to get accustomed to the idea of, let's say, plus. Now even the other ideas of mathematical ideas will become very easy with this kind of representation. For example, which is greater than what? And if I were to say whether tomatoes are greater than cauliflowers, then instead of relying on 1 2 3 of Hindu system, which is, as I said, a complicated system for initially to understand, but for any child it's obvious that if I am comparing this with this, if I am comparing this number with this, it is obviously the second number is bigger than the first number. And then one can easily say, child can easily say, I can see that this number is greater than this, and therefore again the emphasis on the see. The child should see that this is a lengthier than this block, and therefore you will say the number of tomatoes are greater than cauliflower. It's very simple to see that this number here is larger in size than this number here. And that's how the greater than concept can be taught. And similarly, with the same logic, one can devise strategies to teach less than concept. So you put some objects, ask students to count using these blocks, make a complete block of total number of 1 items, ask them to make complete block of number of items of other, and then compare directly visually which looks bigger, and then they should be able to say which is less, and either the other is equal to. So in fact you are teaching, let's say, operation plus. You are also teaching small children greater than or equal to or less than. All these operations become visually very very clear to the children, rather than that saying 3 is greater than 2 or 5 is greater than 1, where you are basically relying on rote learning, where student does not understand the meaning of the numbers and they are simply cramming and saying in the classroom. So make them do this in this manner so that they actually understand the counting and the basic arithmetic operations.